Today, on A Word on Westerns, Nehemiah Persoff.
Two reckless adventurers who started out as sworn enemies.
And Stewart seems like he was acting in another show. And because this was John Wayne's show, Stu didn't look right. And neither did Ina.
Cut them down.
I thought to myself, I better change this. What I had in mind was something different. This was not a John Wayne picture, what I had in mind. And I began to play everything cool.
Welcome to A Word on Westerns, where we talk to the greatest Western creators of yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
What a great voice you have, RJ. Hi, I'm Rob Word, and that was my son showing off in the microphone. He really talks higher.
Yeah, that's my normal voice. But the actor today, his voice, I first heard this voice as Fievel Mouskowitz in An American Tale. And our guest today is actually, believe it or not, the oldest guest we have ever had on the show. He was 103 when we recorded the...
You're close. He was only 102.
Okay. But Nehemiah Persoff.
One of the all-time great character actors, studied at Actor Studio, did live TV, was in On the Waterfront, the Comancheros with John Wayne. That was the last film that Michael Curtiz ever directed. In fact, as most of us know out there, are regular listeners, that John Wayne took over directing of that and directed about 2/3 of the Comancheros because
he knew best.
Michael Curtiz had cancer, and he was a mean guy too. Michael Curtiz, he tortured kids and people, but he made some of the greatest all-time movies like Casablanca and Captain Blood. Is so many good films. We were so lucky to get Nehemiah Persoff because he had written a short book with his, I think it's his cousin or his nephew, Jim Rosin, who's an author who's written several books about television history on subjects like Route 66 or Wagon Train. I was at a autograph show, a celebrity autograph show in Williamsburg, and Jim was there. I met him, and we started talking. I saw on his table some of these great books, and I saw one with Nehemiah Persoff, and I picked it up and was looking at it, and Jim says, you should interview Nehemiah Persoff. And I went, is he still alive? And this was in 2021 when we did this, and Jim said, well, yeah, he's my uncle. Let's get him on the phone. And I go, yes, let's do. So we talked to him on the phone. And when I got back to LA, we set up a Zoom interview.
And man, was he sharp.
Oh, it was wonderful and filled with great stories. And this was in the middle of COVID. So we weren't at the Autry anymore. And he was up in the middle of the state in California. And we hooked up and did a nice, long, in-depth interview where we talk about the Comancheros and On the Waterfront. And his first film, first Western, was directed by one of my favorites, Delmar Daves The Badlanders, with Alan Ladd. And Nehemiah, who had been born in Jerusalem, had never been out west. And he talks about how amazing it all was for him to see this. And what a gentleman, filled with stories too.
And he was in Some Like It Hot with Marilyn Monroe and Brando and Tony Curtis.
Oh, yeah, and several episodes of The Untouchables, too.
And Gunsmoke, and The Wild Wild West, and The Big Valley, and Bonanza. You can really get around in 103 years.
Well, he even kind of makes a joke of it. He's such a gentleman. And then talking to other people who knew him, they just raved about what a wonderful man he was. And he was an artist, too, a painter. And so we had that in common, too. That's a hobby of mine. So we not only talked about these terrific films that he was in, but a little bit about art too. And the Zooms are harder to do than being in person on a 101. And you helped set this up, and I obviously couldn't have done it without you. What is the trick to the Zoom interviews? What's the difficult part?
I mean, there's definitely a delay problem in general that has to be mitigated. And it has grown so much since then. There's a really strong ecosystem for virtual interviews now. But when we did this initially, it was, there were definitely some obstacles, but we lit you and set you up opposite a laptop and shot it kind of like a traditional interview from one side's perspective and just cut back and forth between the two.
Well, I was so fortunate. And then he said, plug my book, talk about my book. And I was happy to do it. And what was wonderful from a standpoint of us talking to this great actor is that he called me up the day the show aired on YouTube, the video version, and said, I've sold 150 books today. And I'm so glad, because he knew that. He knew his fan base was out there. And then he passed away shortly after we did the interview. A couple of months later, he was born August the 2nd, 1919, and died April 5th, 2022. And we had interviewed him in November of 2021. So he got to see that people enjoyed watching him and bought his book too. That made him very happy. Yeah. So I know all of you out there want to hear what he's got to say. And so let's hear what Nehemiah Persoff, at 102 years old, has to say about his career. Thanks for joining us today. Now let's get to Nehemiah. We have a special treat for all of you film fans out there today, because not only do we have a man who has made numerous Westerns, including Comancheros with John Wayne, he also did some wonderful work with Rod Steiger and Marlon Brando. We're going to be talking a lot about it and a lot about him. He's 102 years old, and his name is Nehemiah Persoff. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
Well, I'm so glad you could join us. Your first feature film might not have been The Badlanders, but you worked with somebody who definitely was not an actor studio practitioner, Alan Ladd, who had just come off of Shane, and Ernest Borgnine, who had just won an Academy Award for Best Actor with his wife, Cathy Hirado, in The Badlanders.
Get out of here. You heard my wife?
Your wife?
I'll tell you something about that. I had worked in New York in the studios. New York is the asphalt jungle, you know. And when I was sent out west, I didn't know what I was in for. When I got to the set, the hills, the mountains, the water, the trees, the animals, the horses, the cowboys, all of that was so exciting for me. I loved it. And there I was. And I started talking with the actors, and they were different from the New York actors. They were not as sophisticated as New York actors were. And they were easy, plain, no complication to them. And I loved them. They reminded me of a hero that I had when I was a child. When I was about 12 years old, I lived in Brooklyn. And there was a little theater there called the Echo. It showed cowboy pictures all day long, one after the other. And I worked out a deal with the owner that I would get him a pastrami sandwich every day if he let me in for free. And I did that. And I went in and I saw most of the films were Bob Steele, an actor by the name of Bob Steele. And I just loved him. He was so graceful on a horse sitting there. And he was so good with the guns, twirling them and shooting, never missing the mark. When he hit a guy, I was down. He was a hero to me. Years later, when I was doing COMANCHEROS with John Wayne, at 102, I have to tell you, at 102, my mind sometimes works tricks on me, but I'll be there. Okay, don't worry about it. So where was, John Wayne. So Yeah. Going to the set one day, a short man, an old man with a cowboy hat came to me and he said, "Excuse me, Mr. Persoff, I hope I'm not bothering you, but I'd like to tell you that you've been a great hero of mine. I love your work on television," and so on, so on, so on. He said, "My name is Bob Steele." Oh, God. Oh, God. And I told him what I thought of him, and I put my arms out, and he put his arms out, and we gave each other a big, big hug.
Isn't it nice when you meet somebody who you have admired on screen and you meet them in person, that they are still very special?
It was so exciting for me. And then I started talking, and he said, "Excuse me, I have to go to makeup because this is my only day on the job, and I have to run." So he ran, and I never saw him again. But it was a great thrill to meet him. And I loved the Western actors. They were great. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the Comancheros then, because John Wayne, you must have seen a lot of his films as you were growing up too, because he'd been in movies since 1930, making those B Westerns too, but he was a superstar at that time. And Michael Curtiz, who directed all those wonderful Errol Flynn movies at Warner Brothers, this was his last movie as a director.
I was very excited working with Wayne. I wasn't sure about Curtiz. He was kind of cranky. Let me tell you something that I did which made him even more cranky. Wayne was doing a close-up of a scene with me, and the first take I thought was very good. It was emotional. It was really nice. And Curtiz said, "Cut, let's have another one." And he did another take, and I didn't like that so much, but he said, "Print, that's good." And I whispered to John, who was right near me, and the director was in the back. And I said, "I thought that the first take was better." He said, "Really, was it? Okay, I'll keep it in mind," he said. And he had to say, because he really was the authority there. And he came over to me and he said, "Tell me, who's directing this film?" I said, "Oh, God, I was a brash New Yorker. I shouldn't have said, I'm sorry. And never mind." Later on, we were shooting, and it's very, very hot outside. And I said to John, who was standing next to me, I said, "Boy, it's hot, isn't it?" He said, "Yes." And he walked away. And a few minutes later, he came with a couple of guys carrying big screens that covered us all for about a football size, covered everything, and cooled down everybody. It was great. And Curtiz said to Wayne, "That was a very good idea, John." Duke, that was a very good idea. And Duke said, "Don't thank me, thank Nicky." And Curtiz said, yeah, sure, okay.
His health was failing, and he left. Didn't John Wayne direct a lot of that movie? Even when Curtiz was there, Wayne he was always watching over me and making sure that he was okay. Yeah. Ina Balin played your daughter in that, who falls in love with that outlaw on the run, Stuart Whitman. What was that like with the two of them?
They were all friends, so I knew them, but I'll tell you something about that. I came to shoot the movie a few days early. So I had a chance to see the rushes. The rushes are films that are done and shown in the morning for the producer and director to check on. So I looked at the rushes and I thought, this is very different from what I was playing in my head, because Stu Whitman was a fine actor, but he was not acting in the style that Wayne was acting.
My friend, you're a very brave man. And pretty soon you're going to catch on I ain't your friend.
The leading actor, the star, sets the tone for the truth of that particular piece. And Stuart seems like he was acting in another show. And because this was John Wayne's show, Stu didn't look right. And neither did Ina. I thought to myself, I better change this. What I had in mind was something different. This was not a John Wayne picture, what I had in mind, and I began to play everything cool. And if you see the picture, you know that the head of COMANCHEROS is a very cool guy. And that was because I saw, and I realized then that the star of the film sets the tone, not you, no matter how good you are.
The COMANCHEROS who dealt in death.
We have a society here. A society that's different from anything visualized by people anywhere in the world. The industry of our society is crime. It pays, and we prosper. The rules of our society are magnificently simple. Transgress, and you die.
Was the transition from working on stage to working on film difficult?
No, it wasn't, but I had a very good teacher. The very first film that I did was The Harder They Fall with
Humphrey Bogart.
One day I was doing a scene with Humphrey Bogart head to head, and down the hall, out of the door came the prize fighter that we were talking about, and he hit his head on the chandelier. And while he did that, I looked at Bogart, and he didn't register it. So being, as I said, a brash kid from New York, I went to the director. I said, I think Humphrey missed out on something. And he said, what? And I said, when the guy came out, he hit the chandelier. He didn't register. Bogart didn't register. He said, yes, he did. Did he? I was right next to him. He did not. He said, come tomorrow to the Russians. And I saw the Russians. And when Bogart saw this actor and he hit the chandelier, his eyebrows just went up a little bit, just enough to register for the camera. It didn't need more.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned that day something that was invaluable. When you're on stage, you have to reach the second balcony. And if you see something and you want to show that you're reacting to it, you have to find something big so that they can see you. But in movies, the camera's right on you, as you see now. And every little bit that you feel comes across. So I learned that from Bogart.
Well, that's good to learn that right away. And you have worked with some fine directors, too. I know Andre de Toth directed you in Day of the Outlaw, too, which is a Western beautifully shot in black and white that a lot of people don't know about, with Robert Ryan, and Burl Ives is wonderful as a villain.
What I remember that film mostly is the snow.
Uh-huh.
You know, the snow was so high that when you rode the horses in a pad, your head was above the snow, and so was the horse's head. But it was real heavy snow. And that's what most impressed me there.
What was Andre like?
In this deep snow, Andre came to direct the movie, took off his shirt, and bare-chested directed the show in the snow, just, I guess, to show something.
Macho.
Yeah. He was married to Veronica Lake then,
Mm-hmm.
a lady where you can only see one eye because she always had, her hair was over one eye.
What was Robert Ryan like? Because he was an actor who was so versatile. He played so many villains, but yet he wanted to be the hero in movies, and this one he was.
Robert Ryan had great ambitions. As a matter of fact, before this film, he went to New York and did a Shakespeare play in which he didn't succeed.
Mm.
But he had ambition to do good work, and he aimed to be as true and honest as he could. The movies that he made did not really show his great talent. He had a talent, yeah, and a nice man.
Yeah. Burl Ives, who was a nice man too, played great villains.
Yes, because he was so fat and heavy. And when Kazan put him in that show, what was it called?
He played Big Daddy. Was it?
Big Daddy, that's right. Yes. He was the villain there, and he was so good in it that he kept that as his mark as an actor. Yeah. You know, in New York, he lived on a boat on the East River. He was a folk singer. But then he became a movie actor and made a big hit.
Your knack for accents. I know Eli Wallach said one time that he was the most successful and popular Mexican bandit of any Jewish person who ever lived, and yet you did quite a few Mexican bandits too.
Yes, I did.
How did you develop this knack for great accents? Because you do Italians and Germans and just any nationality.
You know, I developed an ear for the accents in Jerusalem, actually, where I was born, because there were people from Russia, from Siberia, from Afghanistan, from Italy, from Germany, from all over the world. And I heard all of these accents. When I came to New York, there they were. So I used to enjoy imitating them. I never realized that I would be able to use that professionally and make some, send the kids to college.
Well, you're so credible, so believable. I know, and it's not a Western, but it's a classic, a great Billy Wilder movie, Some Like It Hot, because you come in and you're the head of the Italian Opera Lovers Association. What was that film like working? I mean, that was such a great movie. Marilyn Monroe, Tony Curtis, Jack Lemmon, and then you end up doing Away with George Raff.
What was most interesting for me was the way I got the job.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Charles Lederer was the director, movie person, who was brought up in the Hearst Castle, which is just 6 miles from here. He knew everybody in Hollywood, and he made friends with everybody. One day he was playing cards with Billy Wilder, and Billy Wilder said, "That son of a bitch, Eddie Robinson." He walked out and thought that he was supposed to play. Charles Lederer said, "That's nothing. Get Nicky Persoff. He can do it." He said, "Who?" "Nicky Persoff, Nehemiah Persoff." Never heard of him. He said, he'll be great. He'll be great. Said, "Well, play your cards." No. And he got the phone and he put it right next to him. And he said, "Call. He's got the same agent that you have, and call him." I said, no, call him." So he called the agent and he said, "What's his name?" "Nehemiah." "Who?" And the agent picked up. "You mean Nicky?" "Nicky, yeah, he'd be great in the role." And so the next morning, I went there. He didn't ask me many questions. He just asked me, would I shave my head bald? And I said, sure. And I shaved the bald. And then I went in one day to shoot the scene. When I went in to shoot the scene, it was new to me. There were a number of things new. One was that there were a whole bunch of extras, gangsters around. And it was very important for me then for them to realize that I was an important gangster. I walked in rehearsal and did the scene, and a guy sitting next to me says, "Who the hell is that?" I thought Eddie Robinson was supposed to do it. That's all I needed. I turned on him and I said, "Who was supposed to do it?" He said, "Edwin G. Robinson." "You know him?" "No." Do you know who I am?" "No." "Okay, suppose you get up and get the hell out of here. I don't want anybody like you here." He said, "What?" I called the assistant director and I asked him to get the guy out of there, and the guy wouldn't. So Billy Wilder said, "Come on, get up and get out of there. You're wasting my time." The guy got up and went out, and all of the gangsters then had respect for me. Now, Sammy Davis Jr. and Sidney Poitier and Dorothy Dandridge were shooting a film next door to mine, to where we were shooting. It was this very well-known musical. My mind just doesn't grab it now. Anyway, they came in, they shut down filming on their scene. They came in to see my scene. And when Billy Wilder saw them, he started telling jokes. And Sammy told jokes. And everybody was telling jokes. And I was ready. I was all worked up and I was ready to go. And they were telling jokes. Finally said, "Okay, Nicky, go ahead." So the attitude in the room was also, everybody was laughing. And so I mixed that together with the anger that I had. I didn't do it consciously. I just did it because it came out that way. And fortunately, it came out to be the way what people saw. It was Billy Wilder doing it, and that was his way of getting the performance he wanted out of me.
How smart of him to do that.
Yeah. He was good, smart man.
You were born in 1919 and came to the United States in New York when you were 10 years old. What was that like?
It was a shock for me to come to America. It took me about 3 years to get used to it. I used to cry in bed at night. Eventually, I got used to the place.
How did you first learn that you had a knack for acting?
I knew that when I was a little boy. When I was about 3 years old, I remember I had a tall, beautiful lady who was our kindergarten teacher. And she sometimes would look at me, but often, not as often as I wanted to. But I got on the bike, I remember, and I made a few turns and then fell down and pretended that I was hurt. I pretended. And she took me in her arms, and it was just wonderful. So at that time, I realized that I could make people believe what I was doing, whether it was fake or not. And that brought me to acting, I suppose.
And you were part of in New York, part of the Actors Studio. How were you selected to become part of that? You were one of the early practitioners of the Actors Studio.
Well, I was not the only one, but the Actors Studio was brought about by Elia Kazan, who had a certain idea of how he wanted his actors to act. And in order to do that, he created a place called the Actors Studio. It was a sort of a school for actors. And he auditioned about 1,000 or more actors in New York. And of those, he chose about 50 or 60. And we started studying and learning the new method of work from him and Lee Strasberg. And that was a great thing for me. It was a great honor to be there. And it was very helpful in my development as an actor.
Well, with Elia Kazan, you were one of his select students because he cast you in On the Waterfront with Marlon Brando and Rod Steiger.
Yes, yes. I'll tell you how that happened.
Sure.
I was taking a class with him, and after the class, he came over to me and he had a way of putting his arm around your neck like that. So he almost choked, and he said to me, "Nicky, do you want to earn $75? I said, 75? Yes, sure. He said, "Come down to so-and-so and we'll shoot. You'll be the taxi driver," and so on. So that's how he hired me. And it was a very exciting afternoon, as you probably know, because they were shooting the taxi scene there. And there I was ready to drive them off. And before I drove them off, I knew nothing about what I was doing. But Kazan came, stick his head in the cab, and he said to me, "That son of a bitch in the back killed your mother." That's all I needed. I got so angry. Then the camera did the rest. It came in and a close-up, and I turned around, and that was it. That was my job. But it was great.
Such a classic scene, too, with Steiger and
yes,
Brando.
Steiger and Brando, too.
How were they together?
I think, I'm not sure, but I think that Steiger was a little bit on the defensive when he was with Brando, because Brando was the king. Brando was a guy who set the tone for actors in his period.
Sure.
I don't think that the acting style of that period would have come in had it not been for Kazan and Strasberg and Marlon Brando, who really showed it on screen. And everybody said, yes, they're right. Their method is great. Brando learned, I think, his work from Stella Adler.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you a little story about that. It was during the war, right after I left. I was a student of Stella Adler. And when the war started, I had to go into the army. When I came back, I had a 3-day pass. I went to the studio, to the dramatic workshop, to meet Stella Adler, to say hello. I opened the door and the room was dark. And in the bright light was a young kid doing a scene that I knew well because I'd done it before. And he was fantastic, really fantastic. When the scene was over, I walked in and she introduced us, said, "Nicky, this is Bud, Marlon Brando." And then after that, I saw him in Streetcar. And like all other actors in New York, I began to sort of come under his influence.
What did you think of Sidney Poitier?
Sidney Poitier, he was, I had an incident with him. If you're interested, I was.
Sure.
When I met my wife in Israel, I had to come back because I was on vacation from Peter Pan in New York, and I had to be back in time. So her mother said to me, when you come back, why don't you bring us a refrigerator? I was making a big $90 a week in that role. It was a small role. Anyway, next year when I was about to go back to Israel, I thought I better save some money, so I have a refrigerator, and I saved $50. Wasn't really enough to get a good refrigerator. So the standing me, Bill Marshall, the actor, the tall actor, was my partner in the dressing room. And one day, Sidney Poitier, his friend, came in and said, "Do you want to play some poker tonight?" And he said, "Yes, I'll go. How about you, Nicky?" "Yeah, I'll play. I thought, I can get this $50 up a little bit. I'll have a refrigerator, and that my problems will be solved." So we went to play, and we played until 7:00 in the morning. And the last call, Sidney was sitting on my right, and he said, "I put in all my stakes. All the money he had on the table, he put in." And I thought, that guy is trying to fool. He had that famous Sidney Poitier stare that he made so much money on. And he said, "I'll take you." And I put all my money in. And Steve Hill put his money in. He was there too. And he had a full house. I had 3 deuces. And I gave him my money, and it was time to go. And Steve and I walked down the street, and I was kicking him in the behind, and he was kicking me in the behind. We didn't have a penny for the subway. We had to walk all the way home. And I lived down under the Manhattan Bridge.
What happened to the refrigerator? Did you get a refrigerator?
Yes. I somehow managed to get $100 and I bought a refrigerator and I sent it over. When it got there, it did not work, but my wife's father was a mechanic and he made it work. And when I got there, it worked. And when I was there for 2 years and when I left, it still worked. So it was okay.
With that, we will end our show, and I want to thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Wow. If you want to read Nehemiah's fantastic book, we're going to put a link in the description of this episode.
Oh, that's nice. You know, Nicky may have been only 5 feet 7 inches tall, but he was a giant on screen, and his performances were powerful, and people for generations are going to be enjoying those. And just like we have, I mean, goodness, he started movies in the early 50s and did so many feature films and TV shows, as you mentioned when we started. And what a guy, when he says, you know, I kind of forget things sometimes. You know, you have to bear with me. I'm 102 years old. What a cool guy.
He was sharper than a lot of guests we have that are literally half his age.
And they say that, too. Nobody can believe that he is as sharp as he was. And again, I want to thank Jim Rosin for helping arrange the interview, because it was and is a highlight, and we were blessed to be able to have him join us, and I'm so happy that he had a good time too.
Well, we hope you enjoyed listening to Nehemiah and our ramblings, and have a fantastic day. Happy trails.
Happy trails, everyone. Thanks again, Nicky, for joining us on A Word on Westerns. Rest in peace.
If you enjoy what we do here, please take a moment to follow our show and share these interviews with your friends. You can also find A Word on Westerns on Patreon, Facebook, and YouTube. Thank you, and see you next week on A Word on Westerns. A Word on Westerns is produced and hosted by Rob and RJ Word. Edited by Alex Lockett and Boar and Ebor Dro. Location audio is provided by Richard Reagan. Sound design by Alex Lockett. A Word on Westerns theme song was composed by Karel Pasoda, with additional arrangements by Shipwreck Music and RJ Word.